Path to the Farm. Come with us and discover the wonderful world of agriculture. Let us walk along its roads and let's learn about caring for the environment, optimizing resources, technological advances, new and efficient production methods, and country living. Path to the Farm. Today, on Path to the Farm, we highlight a project that produces tomatoes inside a greenhouse, which is spearheaded by single working mothers. It is an example of people joining their wills together in order to generate economic growth for the rural population in the villages surrounding Medellin. In the year 2008, when the municipal's women's office began to operate, we looked for ways to help women in rural areas obtain economic independence and autonomy. The question was how to generate income for rural women. So we reached out to Corpoica, which is a government entity that carries out research in this field, to see what alternatives they could suggest so that we could bring some economic development to the rural areas of Medellin. And we found out that there are good opportunities for working under controlled conditions, given the fact the weather in this area is becoming increasingly less predictable and difficult to manage. Among the products that they've been researching were tomatoes, and that's what they recommended. Why tomatoes? Because it's a plant that requires a great deal of labor. And since we were looking to generate employment income, it fit perfectly with what we at the Women's Office were trying to accomplish. Also, because it's a product that has many different marketing possibilities, not just tomatoes for daily consumption, but also tomatoes for the food industry. So the first work that we did was a research project with Corpoica to define which tomato varieties we could grow in the rural areas of Medellin and what would be the ideal conditions to grow them.
So they consulted with us about growing produce in greenhouses. We proceeded to show them the various advantages of this system of production, and we started to select the species to grow. We looked at Corpoica's track record in other parts of the country, and that's how we hit upon tomatoes as the best crop. So we started to build a project that would allow us to build 7 distinct production units where tomatoes could be grown under controlled conditions. This was a very nice project because it has 3 components that I think are key. The first is the socioeconomic impact that this project could have on this group of women. These are rural women with no other alternatives for work or generating income.
I used to feel really frustrated because I wanted to do something, have a job. I wanted something that would generate income because you can't make any money doing household chores. So I felt a little frustrated in that regard. I found out about the project because a girlfriend invited us to attend a meeting about some greenhouses that were going to be built here in the village of San Sebastián de Palmitas. So I invited my sisters. In this unit work 4 women. At first, we were somewhat reluctant because although we are rural women, we weren't farmers. We did not grow crops. Maybe the occasional plant in the garden or onions or tomatoes in the backyard. So at first, we weren't very interested in it. But as time passed and we met Lucia Carvajal, who was the person whose job it was to come to the village to tell us about the project. Then we became more enthusiastic, and we decided to take part in the project. Here in San Sebastián, machismo is really prevalent. So when the idea of the project arrived, and we started to prepare the terrain, it wasn't just men, but also some women, who would tell us that you all are not capable of doing that. You don't look like you can grow tomatoes. Anyway, it took longer than we expected. At first, when we were preparing the terrain, people constantly made fun of us. And they would say, "See, you won't get anything out of that." But we went on to put up the structure. It's a very beautiful and innovative structure. And we started to grow tomatoes. And the first plants were beautiful. And we started to harvest those first tomatoes. This caused quite an impact within the village. Then people started to see what happened, and they said, "Well, these women are really enterprising and hardworking."
Another important goal here is gender equality. The idea behind this project is to work with single women head of households, women who have an urgent need to generate income to support their families in need.
This project has made many of us women grow up in a way, because first of all, we didn't know the first thing about working on a farm. By contrast, nowadays we have a great deal of experience when it comes to planting tomatoes, peas, and any crop you can imagine. We can grow. And thanks to God, we've done it very well. We have some wonderful teams. The way I see it, this program has been excellent for the village around San Cristobal. If everyone banded together and looked at the countryside with different eyes, it would be great for women and their households. Because they have responsibilities, and they can generate extra income and help their families. We can have our own money. It's not the same as asking your husband, "I need money for this or that." Now we have our own sources of income. We can grow. We now will not starve. And we know our life will be easier from now on.
Another very valuable aspect is that it was an opportunity for our institution, Corpo Ica, to implement the knowledge we have developed within our research centers over the years and to bring them to society in a way that was truly useful, and more so in this project since the social component was always front and center.
You learn a great deal, and given the fact that we were only doing domestic work, now we have a chance to go out and do different things, and that is truly gratifying. Mixing domestic work with greenhouse work is truly profitable for use. Because besides the skills we're learning, we are receiving not a salary, but definitely extra income. Whenever a project of any type is started, the diagnostic stage is key in order to improve the chances of success. It's necessary to be very objective and realistic with the situation at hand and how far you plan to go. We made a quick participatory diagnostic in each one of the villages in order to analyze how the women were faring, what kind of activities they were involved in, what their expectations were, and what they wanted to do. What we found was that these women had indeed received some attention from city government in previous years. And they had received training in crochet, foaming, baking, gastronomy, and other subjects. But in the end, none of these women had been prepared to do anything. And we found that no one had paid attention to activities what they had traditionally performed, such as taking care of their home vegetable gardens. So we got the idea to get them involved in this production process as a generator of jobs and income with well-established crops and with guaranteed technical assistance throughout the entire process. I say that I restructured my time because I can definitely see that 50%, if not 60% of the time, we were not doing anything productive. I restructured my work, and I feel very good because now I'm in school, and now 24 hours in a day is not long enough. But stretching out your time, you can accomplish a lot. The first step in implementing a project or planting a crop is to become very well educated and versed about it. Knowledge is necessary for the project to bear fruit. Otherwise, it would be yet another failure, a waste of time and money. The first thing we did with the women was to invite them to the Corpoica offices so we could show them each of the stages of tomato production so that they would get to know how to manage the crop, what the requirements are, and also so that we could get to know what a fully productive plantation looks like, and so they would have some idea of what to expect. So, throughout the year 2009, we periodically brought them over to Corpoica, exposed them to the research so that they would get first-hand knowledge of the crop's development stages. There we motivated 40 women from each village, and we brought them to Corpoica, meaning a total of 120 women received the full training, and they benefited from technology transfer in tomato cultivation. The technical education was great. We had the full benefit of Corpoica, and in particular, Jorge Jaramillo trained us, who gave us many classes in the process of growing tomatoes in greenhouses. The training sessions were excellent, and we learned a lot about planting tomatoes. We learned everything, all the way from planting the tomato all the way to harvesting. It was excellent. In this project, I've learned that things don't just happen by themselves. And nothing is free. Everything has a price. Here I work, I like what I do, I feel good, and I'm more independent economically and in every other way. It must be because I love what I'm doing. Another important component is the technology that is available for the development of these projects. One must choose that which best suits the situation according to the initial diagnostic.
Once we started to select the species, we set out to find the greenhouse locations, the best lots, the most suitable. We started to look for the most technified greenhouses we could give these women so that they could end up with an asset that had the potential to have a long-lasting, useful life. And, despite encountering truly adverse conditions when it came to the terrain where most of the greenhouses were due to be located, oftentimes, the soils were not optimal for growing this crop. So, despite these conditions, we started building the greenhouses. At the same time, the Women's Office started identifying the groups of women that were formed, those that were coming together, and they started strengthening them through training sessions that covered a range of topics, such as the issue of marketing and selling the product, the issue of accounting, record keeping, and the like. And while we started building out the greenhouses, we started training each group of women. It was done in 2 stages. First, they visited existing tomato plantations, particularly those that we had in the La Selva Research Center, where women could come in contact with the crop directly, and through periodic visits, they started to see how the crop evolved and which are the important tasks that were necessary in managing it. Likewise, we held approximately 12 workshops where we tried to cover all of the issues that a grower needs to know in order to produce high-quality tomatoes, starting by teaching them about the different types of soils, soil analysis, how to interpret a soil analysis. We taught basic agricultural management techniques like pruning, fertilization, and irrigation, what type of seedlings to plant, etc. We also covered basic topics such as how to control pests and diseases, as well as physiological disorders, which allowed them to differentiate and identify the symptoms of plague from symptoms of disease. They know how to identify in the field if a problem is caused by a plague, a disease, or a physiological disorder. They can identify the factors that promote these problems and the different agricultural practices that they need to implement in their greenhouse to control these problems.
These communities can successfully develop these projects and generate income for their families if they commit to specific goals and jointly work for the common good. The cultivation of tomatoes and vegetables can offer a good alternative for communities that live in areas next to big cities.
The most satisfying result of this project as a whole was seeing it through to the end. We have 7 well-built greenhouses equipped with the necessary technology and with all of the tools necessary to produce tomatoes. We have 7 groups of women organized around a crop, and they are fully committed to making the crops successful. And over time, we can see that they have been able to generate income and truly improved their standard of living.
Today, we have 14 greenhouses built. Not everyone followed Corpoica's recommendation, which was to set up greenhouses that were 1,000 square meters in size, because it was not always possible to find the terrain. And we have 12,600 square meters of greenhouse, divided into 14 production units, organized around 5 cooperatives, 1 for each village. These have also given birth to second-level companies, which are tasked with helping to plan the crops and with helping to organize marketing efforts so that our products can get to where they need to go and society can recognize the value that can be achieved with a system of good agriculture practices. Projects are viable if you follow all the steps, starting with setting a common purpose, the diagnostic phase, the educational phase, the implementation phase, and the follow-up phase. This is only an example of what can be achieved when local authorities, farmers, and specialized technicians work together.